new rigorous state standards, and we're going to be talking about implementation and opportunities.
The goal of what I want to talk about, or the work that I'm going to talk about, is that each and every child leaves our K-12 or TK-12 public system with the opportunity and the power to pursue a future of his or her own choosing, not based upon the color of their skin, not based upon their language that's spoken at home, not based upon some kind of birth
If you could
capacity.
pull that a little closer.
Not based upon a zip code, not based upon socioeconomic class or the parents' education, and that the communities that support those outcomes are the norm and not the anomaly. So that's what we're about, and to do that, that's going to require commitments and responsibilities in three areas, and these are going to sound like the pillars, and they're going to sound like what Michael spoke about. It requires commitments for the resources, it requires commitments for meaningful learning, and it provides the commitments for professional capacity. And I'm going to talk about one project that may seem to be about quote-unquote professional capacity, but it actually is about all three responsibilities, because you can't have one without the other two. So the name of the project is the Instructional Leadership Core Project, and I'm going to describe it from four perspectives in a very short amount of time, and Aaron is already taking bets with everybody that it won't be short and that I won't be able to be brief. Then Angela STEGALL, who is a member of the Instructional Leadership Corps, will tell the truth and tie those four perspectives together by explaining what she has done and is doing as an ILC Corps member. All four perspectives highlight the imperative of partnership, trust, and time. And I'm not going to, because I don't have the time to do it, point out how everything I'm saying about this project relates to what Michael just said and what Andy's going to say later on, because I'm hoping it will be relatively clear. So, funded by Bechtel, Stewart, Silicon Valley Community Fund, and the California Education Policy Fund, the ILC is a partnership between the CTA, SCOPE, and the National Board Resource Center to establish and sustain an instructional leadership corps who will help grow the local capacity necessary for our children to be successful in meeting the richer learning goals of the Common Core state standards and the next generation STEIN standards. And I had to read that both to be brief and also to get the right words down, because it's a partnership, and in partnerships it's very important to say the right things so you don't get in trouble with your friends. One perspective is pedagogical, and the basic capacity, you have this in your folders, it's up on the screen, is pedagogical, and the basic capacity we're trying to grow is around these instructional shifts that support student opportunities for learning the new standards, and, importantly, leadership shifts that support teacher capacity to learn and enact those instructional shifts. But instructional shifts are just a tool. Unless one knows how to use a tool, the tool is of little value. Give me a chainsaw, and I am more likely to cut a limb off of my body than I am to cut a limb off of a tree. And so what do teachers need to know, this is the pedagogy piece, and be able to do to enable them to use these instructional shifts well? And they have to have knowledge and skills in four areas. They have to know their kids, the communities from which those children come, their cultures. They have to know what I call pedagogy, which some people would include all of this in pedagogy. They have to have the content knowledge, which some people would call the standards, and something that's old. That goes back to John Dewey, right? What we've added in this project, and I have to admit I didn't want to do this, but I was swayed by the partners. It's part of learning with and from a partner. We are including the assessments and the claims, because in today's climate, for teachers to be successful with children, they need to understand, and teachers need to understand, how they're going to be asked to show what they know, because there are still stakes attached to those decisions. More challenging than just knowing this stuff is you have to know all this stuff and then be able to integrate these four domains daily in the crucible of the classroom. Another perspective is the structural scalability perspective. And the basic model of this project is the snowball approach at the junior high dance. For those of you who don't remember junior high dances, they caused great permanent damage to my emotional psyche. So I remember them very well. So the music starts and the two most popular kids are dancing, and then the music stops, and then those kids go and ask somebody else. And by the end of 40 or 50 of those, they would get to me, and I would be asked to dance. And that's the basic model that we're following. So we selected 184 ILC members, 160 currently serving as accomplished classroom teachers, and 24 site-based leaders, a category that includes but is not limited to principals. We then provide support for them to do what we are asking them to do, which is to fundamentally, in simplest terms, provide 2 sets of professional development activities, with each set of activities being provided to 50 or so educators. The numbers start to be a math problem. 92 teams times 100 educators means if things go according to plan, which they never do. I'm glad I have the funder next to me so I can say that. So we're going to be touching over 9,000 educators in the first year of this project. In addition to these as-planned touches, our ILC members are being asked to provide opportunities for learning in a variety of other ways. And this is one of those amazing power of partnership stories. So the CTA, through their ongoing activities, provides a considerable amount of high-quality professional development work for their members. They, too, the CTA now is using these people. They had a conference last week. Our ILC members are working and are using those venues, and that enriches the work they've been doing for years, enriches our people's capacity, our partnerships people capacity to do those things. Interestingly enough, some of the districts have asked them to work with their curriculum development, because they say, I got the claims now, I need curriculum materials, and so forth and so on. Another perspective is the coherence and sustainability factor. This is a model of how partnerships learn over time. So we did this last year, and I already don't like it. But there are multiple levels in an ecosystem of education, always starting with the learner in the center. The concentric circles of this ecosystem move to teachers, principals, schools, and districts. As we revise this moving forward, we're going to include families and communities as one of the concentric commercials. Counties and states, and in this state of California, the role of the county offices of education are increasingly significant, and of course even the federal government has some sorts of roles, and unlike Michael, we can't choose not to work with our federal government sometimes if we may disagree with them. We can't leave England like you did. Although I'm sure that the superintendent's not here, so I won't say that. So we started with the children and the teachers, but within 30 seconds, we rapidly got into all the other circles. So how the project is working with the other circles varies by context and the strengths and interests and needs of the ILC members. In some instances, the professional development is, to be honest about it, being attended by fundamentally random teachers who choose to attend because they know Angela and love Angela, and they would do anything that Angela did. Or the union is sponsoring it, and I trust the union to provide quality work because it's going to come from people who know something and who are going to be there tomorrow. And that's not a bad thing, but much to our satisfaction, in other cases, the PD is being provided by the faculty to their entire school because the principal said, you know what, I too like Angela, and this is going to help all of our school. In other cases, the district has said, you know what, we already had a planned time where we were going to take all the 4th and 5th grade math teachers, or in this case, most of the teachers because it's not separated by content. I would like Angela, poor Angela's going to be very busy, I would like Angela to provide that series of workshops for all of our 4th and 5th grade teachers. In other places, they've gone away from that, and the BITSA program has said, that's really important. We would like you to work on this with our BITSA teachers. And in other cases, local colleges and teacher education programs have said, would you come and work with us around this with our pre-service teachers? So the network is growing in ways that we couldn't predict, but that I think are very positive, but also fearful, using the earlier frame. The takeaway from these stories is that the work of the ILC members has to, and sooner rather than later, connect with existing initiatives and funding streams, both to provide coherence for the participants, so they're not hearing 17 different things from 17 different people, but on a very crass basis to provide the resources necessary for sustaining the work. A key element in this regard, which you're going to hear about next, is the LCAP, because all roads in this sort of thing currently in the state of California, in my opinion, lead to the LCAP. The fourth and final perspective are the process principles of the project. I call these the values, the non-negotiables. We think that the capacity exists in the world to do this work, but it doesn't mean that everybody can do whatever they want to do. And so these are the frames that we're saying people need to follow. One, use capacity to grow capacity. We started with the 3 partners who all had complementary capacities. And then we moved to the ILC members that included already both accomplished classroom teachers and site-based leaders. And I want to say again, and it's something that came up earlier, the capacity to do this work that we're asking the people to do exists in the system today. We didn't do any marketing. We got started late. We had over 600 highly qualified applicants for 184 slots. And our phones keep ringing because more people want to play. It exists. That's the good news. Then there's collaboration. We've talked a lot about collaboration, but everything is done in partnerships. You have the project partners, you have the classroom teachers and the site-based leaders, the ILC members work together. Angela doesn't go off by herself to do what she's going to describe. She always does it with somebody else. And then the linkages with existing initiatives and funding streams. And next to last, recursive and continuous. The simple language of what we're trying to do is learn something, do something, learn more, do it again better, rinse and repeat. And then you have coherence and alignment. As noted in the other perspectives, the entire project is dependent upon linkages with existing initiatives and funding streams. The ILC members, I think we've established clearly, are inspirationally, and I don't use the term lightly, capable of throwing a great party, but if no one comes, it's not going to be much of a party.
For me, when I was first approached about applying for the ILC, I had the initial reaction of, I really have enough to do. As a classroom teacher, I thought, I kind of have plenty on my plate. And then as I read through the project proposal, there was one key line in it that caught my attention and probably caught the attention of every other teacher that applied, which was the concept of the ILC being there to grow local capacity and reclaim the role and responsibility of professional educators in the definition, design, and development of learning opportunities for each other and our students. Right now, one of the greatest things about the Common Core State Standards or our new California State Standards is that for a lot of teachers, it has really brought about a renewed energy, a renewed enthusiasm for what we do and how we do it. It's been a while since we've had new standards. And so when these new standards came along, it was everybody kind of woke up, smelled the coffee, and went, let's hit the ground running. And now with the ILC and with the new state standards, teachers again are seen as the experts in the field. We're once again finally seen as professionals and professional educators. And so with that comes the idea of professional development. And right now, teachers are devouring, desiring, demanding professional development. And more than anything, they want it to come from teachers, people that they trust, people that they know are in the classroom every day and who will come in and talk to them as a professional, as a peer and a colleague. And that's what the ILC does. When I went to our first launch session, I was about half terrified, kind of like I feel right now. I was about half terrified by the time I got done with it because...
Wait, you got invited to dance.
I did, a little. But then my mom chaperoned the dance, so that was kind of cut a little short. But I left that, though, with the ideas of having the instructional shifts to guide my professional development, having the 4 domains to guide my professional development. And with that came a whole system for how to go out and do it. Instead of just going out and having this whole shotgun approach and wherever the pellets land, they may land, it was very much, here's a system. And when I got back to my site, we had just had WASC at our site, which is accreditation. Our accreditation team had left 2 days before I left to go to the ILC launch. And when I came back, we were looking at our initial response from our accreditation team that had visited us. And although it was positive, the one key thing that they remarked was that we didn't have a professional development plan. And our site initially went, well, that's a district office. And at my site, that's across the street. So we always talk about that's across the street. That's a brick building. And so we instantly told them, well, we don't do that. And they said, you do now. in this age of rigor and in this age of raising complexity and in this age of responsibility to your students in your classroom, you do now. And if your district doesn't have a plan, you have to have a plan. And that's what the ILC has fit right into. My principal, my administration jumped right on it. And that's what they said. It's simple. We don't have to go out and recreate the wheel. And so I instantly went in and I was able to do a professional development session with my teachers. And my teachers were really looking for ways, new methods of assessment. And because, especially since we're moving away from multiple choice tests, if you haven't seen a little YouTube video called I Choose C, you really should. And that was kind of the guiding principle behind the whole thing of, well, now that it's not just multiple choice tests, we need other forms of assessment. We need other ways to know what our kids know. And that's what we spent our whole session on. And the one key thing that came out of that, the one idea that everybody on my staff, all 47 of us, which some of you that are from much bigger schools just went 47, but all 47 of us, was a really quick, easy, formative assessment, and it's called a 3-2-1 activity. And you can mold it, you can modify it, you can do whatever you want with it, but it's quick, it's simple. My teachers left that room thinking, really, it's this easy? But for instance, you have your kids, they may have a reading selection for the day, and towards the end of that, you ask them, what are 3 things you learned? What are 2 things that you're still confused about? And what's one thing you really enjoyed about today's lesson? And then in order to get your students to speak, they've already got that paper in front of them. So as a teacher, you ask them, so what's one of the 3 things you learned? And you're not putting a kid on the spot anymore. They have it right in front of them. And so you don't get the, I don't know, I didn't learn anything. Well, there's writing on your paper. And also for teachers, we have a tendency to bail our students out, especially in a class discussion. Worst thing possible is to ask a question and hear silence. For a teacher, it's like the kiss of death. You just think they all left the room, they're bored, they're done. And so with that simple activity, they have an answer for you. You don't hear the crickets anymore. You can prompt them and not have to save them, not have to bail them out. They're the ones doing the learning. You're the one then doing the assessing, and then you're informing your instruction for the next day. And my staff left a 1-hour session with 3 or 4 other ideas, but that one in particular. And I'm still receiving emails right now about the fact that, hey, that was great. Can you send me another one? Can you send me another way to tweak that? Can I use it for this? Can I use it for that? And especially for our teachers that aren't ELA teachers, they are finding that, you know what, that's really simple. I thought when you told me that I was going to have to teach literacy standards, that I was going to have them write essays and I was going to hit complete panic mode. But if it's this simple and it's this easy, I can do this and I can do this for my students. And that all started with a very simple trip, a terrifying trip to the ILC. And now what's happening is you have ILC members, because we just had a reconvening, who are meeting up with other people saying, I did this, you did that. Can we swap? Can you come to my district? I'll go to your district. Can you come to my region? Then I'll go to your region. And that's really what the whole thing is about. And to use teachers as leaders, to grow capacity, to trust each other, to have those built-in leaders, that's what's going to help teachers, that's what's going to help our communities, and most importantly, that's what's going to help our students.
I'm not supposed to ask a question, but I'm going to ask it.
Oh, no.
Because how many people wrote down what 3-2-1 is? Okay, Kate. How many know 3? How many know 2? And what's number 1? Okay, could you repeat it?
You can do any number of things. For instance, yesterday I had my students read 2 articles, and then I had them tell me 3 things that were similar in ideas between the 2 articles. I had them tell me 2 things that were different between the 2 articles, the article ideas, and then 1 question they had after reading the 2 articles. And then the last 10 minutes of class was just a class discussion. And then I know today, when I left my sub with my class, exactly what my students need to be doing today. I know where they got it, how they got it, where they might have lost track a little bit, where they really excelled, where they struggled, and it was that quick. And I didn't even have to make photocopies for it.
I wish we had tools like that in grant making. Wouldn't that be photocopies? Well, I don't know if I drew the long straw or the short straw on this, but I'm just going to take full advantage because I have peers in philanthropy here and others, and say a few things. I'm going to talk a little bit about, maybe say some basic things that you already know about education grant making, just because I think it's important to say, and then maybe talk about or whine a little bit about our challenge right now, and I think the challenge of education grant makers in this particular era, and about the opportunity in front of us. I'm now almost 10 years in my 10th year in grant making, and so I've had the distinct pleasure of working with many folks in this room, all very quotable, but I will quote Molly Munger for a moment, who always brings up the notion that politics is not the art of the possible, but the art of addition. And you can imagine in this setting that's exactly what she's attempting to do, is set a stage for all of us to come together, differences though we might have on how to proceed, and unify around common cause and big things. And I think the first message I want to deliver to you on behalf of education grant makers, some in this room, is we are with you, all of you, in California, and the leadership and the thinkers here, to try to help you tackle these very, very big issues at the classroom level, in supporting teachers to do these very important things, but also at the district level, at the system level. And there are just no easy answers, because believe you me, in education grant making, what you'd like to do is just figure out what's the problem, where's the button to push, how much does it cost to push that button. That would be the ideal thing to do, and it just never works like that in big problems. The second thing I want to relay about education grant making is, California foundations and foundations nationally have done a lot in education. Pick an issue, early education. I see some good friends here from that world, and I worked at Packard before, and there are a number of foundations on that issue. Linked learning, we know there are a number of foundations there. The emerging socio-emotional learning movement, there's a whole group there. We can pick every issue, and you'll find funders there trying to figure out, well, what will a dollar do? What will ideas do? How can we convene folks? And on Common Core, and on LCAP, and on NGSS, we're all here too. But maybe we're a little bit like Molly, in that, though I don't always believe her, in the sense we want to be a bit nerdy and behind the scenes, and we want grantees to take the lead. But I'll tell you, we're struggling just as hard to figure out where foundation investments can make a difference. And you can see where we've made some choices. The Instructional Leadership Corps and the teachers there, and that unique partnership is one. A set of leading districts in the state under a program we call Math in Common. Long Beach is a cornerstone of that, is another, and you'll hear a little bit about that. And other foundations are doing different things in LCAP and other areas. But there's this, and I think every foundation goes a little bit through this in strategy development. In grant making, you want to develop and be able to tell internally, what is it we're going to do? How are we going to make an impact with a finite amount of money in the public sphere? You develop logic models and boxes and arrows and theories of change, all these very fun things. And then you go and ask every other foundation what they've done and what they've learned, and those papers that result from that all look the same. Don't do it. You're going to lose your shirt. We tried it. We put more money and more years in it than you're about to commit, and it's not going to work because the contextual issues, the politics, the economy, you can't control any of it. Therefore, proceed with caution. And I think you can go back, and if you ever want to talk about it, we could talk about all those cautionary tales. And yet, I will say that the group of foundations in California focusing now see huge opportunity, not only because of stories like we just heard from Angela, which is very encouraging, but because we know that there is that latent good and strength among all teachers. But there's one more thing, and that is the unification of leadership at this particular point in time, which is something that Glenn Price and Glenn, I feel like we're geniuses. We saw this coming years ago. There are leaders in this state who have a higher level vision, who are wanting to come together and tackle tough issues, and we see that come out in LCAP, we see that come out in CCC and others. But it's our struggle in grant making to figure out, well, what will our meager funds do? And that's a real challenge. So let me just pivot a second to the S.D. Bechtel Jr. Foundation. And here, Mr. Bechtel has a vision for STEM education in kids, really tapping into their brilliance, their curiosity, and thinking like an engineer. He thought about it all the way back. He knew it started with young kids, and he knew it started with teachers. And so our charge as foundation staff was, well, how can we reach the most kids in California as possible with a little bit of grant-making dollars? And my education director, Susan Harvey, is in the back there. I can tell you she spent nights reading all of the standards and came back and said, these are going to be pretty good for kids, but they're going to be real hard for teachers to master. And this is back in 2012. We started a series of investments, 5-year investment in 10 districts, math in common, with the intention of helping these 10 leading districts in California really figure out what it would take to help teachers shift to the math standards. And I think I can say now, almost 2 years in, it's a little harder than we thought in 2012. It's going to take a little bit longer. And we need to be more patient because we're seeing districts having to re-engineer all of their professional development systems, rethink it, a new vision, maximize their culture. And I think there's a valuable lesson there for the entire state and especially the CCEE. We're also investing in 8 districts on the NGSS side to try to do some same things, really yield early lessons. Teacher prep is very important. And then there's the ILC. And I think here we're already, just 4 months in, you didn't tell them why it was delayed, John. I'm sure it was not the fault of any funder at this table, but had a slight delayed start. But the teachers made that project go fast. So just sitting with those teachers there, I heard a few valuable statements, and I just want to relay them here because I think they're applicable to the system building. One was, and maybe it was a private moment, so I'm sorry if I'm violating any. We'll
Can you whisper it?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to say it out loud. One teacher said, you know, as a result of this training, I just realized something, and that is no consultant brought to us or TA provider has ever taught the Common Core.
It's not a secret.
Okay, well, it was to me. Nobody told me that. So now, now I've learned something from a teacher. How about that? And I think this has huge implications for the system building because we're trying to help county offices and other systems build on their latent goodness and strength to do something that they may not have real, tangible, specific expertise in. So what do you do there? And I don't have any answers, but I think where I want to leave you is the system building, the durable system building for continuous improvement of districts and for teachers is the vitally important thing. Obviously, we think the ILC is a dimension of it. District leadership is a dimension of it. And I think I can say this safely for the funders. You can count on California philanthropy to be here to do what we can to help all the leadership in this room and outside do the right things for California kids in schools. So thank you.
Thank you. And you're going to hear a lot of the same ideas that you've heard from Michael and from my colleagues up here and from a district's perspective. And Michael said the phrase slow to go fast, and Long Beach has used that for decades. And one of the foundations of Long Beach has been its huge commitment to capacity building and professional learning for all of its employees. I have 3,600 teachers, 7,000 full-time employees, and roughly 12,000 employees altogether. So we've been in this journey now with the standards for 4 years. We started 4 years ago and talked about the shifts and brought everyone along with those shifts. And then last year we took the deep dive with the help of our partners from BECHTEL and other groups, as well as the governor, and we went full implementation in the area of language arts and mathematics. And what we've done is through our teacher leaders, those are those individuals who provide the professional learning to our teams, and we call it instructional leadership teams, very similar to the ILC, the core. And so those teams get together on a regular basis, and then they go back to their sites. And I'm going to give you a specific example that just happened yesterday at my wife's school. My wife's a teacher in the district of 33 years. And so her instructional team had presented some concepts around argumentative writing and complex text that they've been working on throughout this year. So her whole third grade team was released, and they have student protocol to look at student work. And they were analyzing student writing. And they were scoring it against the rubric. And then they were identifying those best practices and identifying, well, how did you get X? And I got Y. And what did you do? What were the strategies that you used? And then they've identified future professional learning that they want to go to. So, and they do this 3 times a year on release time. Plus they have time to meet on a monthly basis as colleagues. And then every Thursday they have time together where they get together by their grade level. And you want, how did you fund all this stuff? Because it costs a lot of money. Well, one is that our friends over here at Bechtel have given us money so that all of our K-8 teachers, 1,300 of them, have 3 professional learning days a year to understand that piece. And then we took the money that the governor gave us through Common Core, and we gave sites money for professional learning to support all this work. And then the district put in money to bring these instructional leadership teams together 4 times a year to understand the big ideas, so that then, and to give us the concepts back where we need to go in the future. And John, you talked about the LCAP, and this is what's really, really critical, because this is all about systems. This is all about alignment within the systems. It's about everyone working together. So we, in the beauty as a superintendent, I have to tell you, this is my 13th year, we've never been able to build a plan, a multi-year plan, like we've been able to do today. And it doesn't mean it's going to be static. It means it's a living document that's going to change on a regular basis based on what we're hearing from the field and the needs. So we've already built into the plan that will go to the board in June how we are going to already strategize to put in resources so that when these resources go away from Bechtel and from our other partners, that this work continues. Because the worst thing one can do in my job is to give all this wonderful support to people, and then when the money goes away, guess what? It goes away. So we've made a commitment in the district that whatever we give to a school, whether it be money for their site council, whether it be professional learning money, whatever it happens to be, it's good for 5 years. In order to bring about change takes time, because people, I have 87 schools, and I'll tell you right now, all 87 schools are on a different spectrum on that. Joe's laughing back there because he's our former executive director. We'd meet on a regular basis, and we actually had an ad hoc committee with our TALB group to talk about the Common Core implementation. And it's really, really important because this is really, really hard work. My wife, as a 33-year veteran, said, "Chris, I feel like a brand new teacher after 33 years. She goes, "It's all good." She goes, "But you," and it's great being married to a teacher because she gives me the good, the bad, and the ugly on a daily basis. And so she goes, "But you've got to make sure we have the resources. You have to make sure that we have the time, and we have to make sure that we have the space." And by space, I mean you cannot, and Michael says it so well, you're not going to get to those student outcomes, those claims that we've talked about, if you have a big stick that you're beating people over with. I can tell you, I have never seen people more energized, more tired, but more excited because they see what's happening. And I want to stress this, that as this collective group works together, we have to make sure that the policies of our state allow for that space, allow for that time, because if we do, we will see huge payout at the end. I'm seeing huge payout as I visit schools and as I listen to teachers. But it's about, as we've heard from our teacher colleague here, it's about listening to those people in the field who are the experts who deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And I can't stress enough, bringing everyone together. So what we do now when we bring new concepts to folks, we bring principals and teachers together. So they all hear the same thing, they learn the same thing, and they struggle with those same successes or not success. And then we can identify areas for growth.
I know we've all learned something. We all were confused about something, and we probably all have a couple of questions. So, any questions? If you want to raise your hand and just stand up. What's coming next for ILC?
For the group that we have right now, we already know that we are going into our second phase, the second year of the program, and the program is going to be growing. And John can tell you by exactly how many numbers, because that's kind of a floating number right now since so many people are so eager to participate. The number started out at 1, and I think it's gotten a little bigger than that, and now they're trying to hold steady with some numbers they can manage. For me, I actually have another training this coming Tuesday. I will be meeting with all of the secondary English language arts teachers in my district and leading an all-day training for them in regards to smarter balanced assessments, formative assessments, interim assessments, the digital library, the 3-2-1 check-in, kind of check-out deals. We call them sometimes tickets at the door, where you're asking students questions on their way out the door that they have to exhibit what they have learned or what they struggled with that day before you let them go. It's not holding them prisoner, it's letting them check out. And so I know also within the ILC that we do have members who are working together. I'm working with, there's a group of teachers who are in the county and the district that borders right up against mine. And so we're going to do one of those deals where we flip-flop. And so I know that's coming down the pike. And there's also a third year of the program already in the works. And so the idea is to keep this going, keep sustaining, keep growing the leadership within it. And I know right now also in this second batch, we're trying to find more site leaders, some more maybe of our administrators. I'm actually trying to get one of our high school counselors to join in because they bring a whole different perspective. So as far as I can see, that's the next steps and where we're headed.
Here's why I get excited about this particular process. Well, here's the cynical part, and then I'll give you the hopeful part. The cynical part is, to me, so much of what's happening in K-12 is really about consumer protection. You know, districts are consumers of professional development resources and TA. What protections do they have against the cottage industry where I could probably go hang a shingle right now and, you know, if I had the cash flow, I might be able to, who knows? That's cynical. So this project puts teachers and districts who really can communicate what it is they and their peers need based on good information that they receive from Stanford and CTA. And the immediate results we saw so far, you know, I think about 24 districts saw some action by superintendents based on what their ILC teacher meant. So from our perspective, I think it would be wonderful to have a vision to have 3 to 5 of these teachers in every school, but every time I say that, John, I got to hold John because he gets a little, you know, I can see the sweat, the bead, you know, so, but I think that'd be the upward level. Obviously, we'd love to see it built into the public system. So in that, you know, Freedom 2 scenario of what the CCEE does, well, this is a collaborative of educator excellence right here. So I think that would be an ideal scenario. That said, I think, you know, the grant makers involved, we're going to do all we can to keep this going. I'm a researcher by training after I was a teacher, so I think we really need to evaluate this in a variety of ways, both document what we're doing and what the leading indicators are as well as the outcomes. The theme for next year is the partnerships, particularly moving beyond kind of the random acts of kindness to working with schools and districts and particularly counties. I want to keep pressing this county theme. We had an underrepresentation of principals in the group this year, so we have to oversample principals to make up for that failure on our part last year. And then there's the possibility of having some products that could come out of it. There's, the video notion. What are these leadership shifts, and particularly what do principals do in a staff meeting? What does that look like? We have like the teaching channel has lots of teaching things, but there's very little for the other. I think that there's lessons learned, and then there's just these basic materials. The 3-2-1 is just one example of literally thousands and thousands that come up that people are using every day that I think would be useful in some way, shape, or form, given the opportunities for technology to get information out quickly.
Can you say a few more words about giving folks the space to make this implementation of Common Core and science successful? In particular, from the state level, are there policies we ought to be pursuing or maybe not pursuing that make it more likely for this to be successful implementation?
What we did in Long Beach last year is that we suspended all report cards at the elementary level because they were not aligned. And as you knew, go into this new system, there has to be alignment. And 35,000 kids didn't get report cards, and there wasn't one pushback from a parent. And so teachers appreciated that. They still met with teachers. And so we have a new one this year, which we're piloting. And that's the space, and we've told everybody, it may not be the one that we end up with, and so far, they haven't run us out of town yet, which is positive. We suspended all, at the local level, all our old assessments. We got rid of all of them because they were misaligned. Again, it's about alignment issues. So we're developing new ones with teachers, piloting those, and so those issues. At the state level, I would really hold, and I know people probably think I'm a bit crazy about this because I'm all about progress and accountability, but we need to really take our time and develop the accountability system, whatever it's going to be, and it needs to be multi-measures. And if it takes 2 years, great. If it takes 4 years, great. But I'd rather us do it right and not do anything in the meantime, because systems are still going to have accountability measures like we do in our own system, and we talk about that on a daily basis. So I think that would be, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest things we can do is to get this new system right. Michael talks all about the right drivers. Let's do it right and still focus on the accountability and the student outcomes and everyone working together through capacity building. And because I have great hope for the state. I really do. But at the same time, and I'm not a pessimist. I mean, you can ask anybody in town. I'm terrified that we're going to mess it up, and some folks, with all due respect, in Sacramento are going to create some new law that's just going to take us over the cliff. And so that's my greatest fear.
What we've been saying in CTA is, we probably have, and it started a couple of years ago, we've got about a 5-year window
to get this right, and we're right in the middle of it. And the biggest challenge is changing the culture, because the culture we're in right now is mandates from the state put incredible pressure on superintendents and local school boards to hop to and get it done, which means they've got to put that pressure on teachers, and teachers are feeling complicit in doing something to kids that they don't believe in. And we're shifting that. We're shifting it to basically what the Common Core says is the teacher is the arbiter in the classroom of what's right. It really respects the expertise and the decision-making of the teacher. So this whole shift, I mean, it demands tremendous trust, and it creates incredible anxiety, like Chris just expressed. So how do we accommodate, say, like on a faculty, or in a district management team, or even in the foundation world, this how do we mitigate the anxiety that's starting to build? Because we're talking about doing something completely different, but at the same time believing when we see it working that it's the right way to go, because that's a collision course. So I'm open to what anybody has to say about that.
For me, especially in Marysville, because Marysville, for those of you that are from around here, we're pretty close. We are a small town, about 15,000, 18,000 people, and we typically lean towards being a rather conservative place, but we have representation across the board. And so the response to Common Core in and of itself has been all over the map. And so we have started out with that high energy and then hit some of the speed bumps and roadblocks that I think you're referring to, which a lot of it is anxiety. And what we've discovered in our own district is that, first off, trying to ignore it and just powering ahead doesn't do it. Parents, students, educators, people within the community will still continue to push. And a lack of information does nothing to help that. And so what we've decided to do is we've done things like having parent nights. We've had voluntary after-school meetings for either students, parents, staff members. We have had meetings within our own service center councils, within our CTA and our MUDA organization there, to try to get as much information out as possible, because a lot of the anxiety that we're encountering in my area is about things that just aren't even true. It's the myths and the misperceptions and the misconceptions that are coming with it. And a lot of the time then when you put the information out there and the correct information, that is what people are yearning for. And then you find that you have support actually that comes with that. And even though you may still encounter people who are like, well, it's still not my cup of tea, but now I know the truth of the matter, and I know that we are still all in line with the idea of doing what is best for students. That's what we've had to do, is just get the information out there. And sometimes it's slow coming, and we've kind of had to learn the hard way in our town, because we're one of those that, like, everybody knows everybody kind of thing. And so we've had to step back and realize that just because we all know each other doesn't mean we all know the same information. And so it's really been about information, and even more information. And it's the same thing with teachers even. It's just actually getting the correct information out there has really helped a lot. And in addition, getting the professional development and getting it from people that you know and you trust, convincing your district to kind of start to see the light that this isn't another state mandate pressing down and so pressing down on me. Instead of pressing down on me, let's all press together. Let's all press and work together. And that's where the partnerships and the leadership is really coming in. That's all I've seen help in my district anyway.
Philosophically, human beings have a desire for certainty and security, and they also have a desire for freedom and creativity. And so when my son was born, I thought, well, I was under high anxiety because the kid wouldn't stop crying, right? And I didn't want any more freedom or creativity. I phoned up my mother, and I said, JB is crying. What do I do to make him stop, right? I didn't care anymore about that other stuff because I had a need right now, and it was killing me to hear my son cry. Okay? Well, I think it's...
What did she say?
She said, has he eaten recently? Have you changed his diaper? But as I've become more abstract and I've left the classroom, I think I've gotten trapped in this whole thing about freedom and creativity and democracy. So I think like somehow it's wrong to give somebody an answer if they want an answer. Like, let's sit down and discuss this for 3 weeks. You know, maybe form a committee to discuss it and then make a decision. And I think the lesson here is that for me, and at least for the project that I'm talking about, sometimes it's okay to say, this is 3, 2, 1. It's a simple thing you can do, right? And that's okay. And don't get trapped in I think in some ways we get trapped in thinking that everything has to be reinvented every single time, as opposed to saying, when I'm stressed, when I have a need, have you tried this? Did you feed JB yet? Oh.
We're supporting 18 districts in math and in science, and I think we recognize at the district level with the C&I staff and that it's very hard for them it takes some time for them to rethink how they want to support teachers in these standards. It takes time. But what that's taught us is that what teachers are getting generally on the natural may not be the best quality PD just generally. So I think one answer is somehow we have to set a bar to say, well, there's a bar in which we don't want to go below in terms of how we're going to ask a teacher to spend their time in a professional development setting. There's just some things with these standards that just are not going to ever help them. And so how do you set a higher quality bar for support to teachers?
Dean, one of the most powerful lessons we learned was from our teachers. As you listen to them, they wanted differentiated support because some of them are way up and way faster ahead of everybody. So through support from our Gates friend, we now have a totally differentiated professional learning support system with multiple professional learning communities throughout the entire school system with people. I'll be honest with you, I don't know half what's going on. And that's the power, because they're supporting one another and taking it even further. And that was something that we had to hear from our teacher colleagues. In order to support them to get to the outcome, they needed that source.
So you had a question.
Yes, I asked that question for Chris. Like, what is the impact the system you are implemented for English language learner students?
Correct. So in Long Beach, 24% of our students are English language learners. So every professional learning that we do has a strong component for how to support our English language learners, as well as our students with special needs. So in some cases where there's 70% language learners at that particular school, they're going to go to a deeper dive in strategies and outcomes and looking at assessments. And then we look at those schools as best practice schools and how we can take those good ideas and spread them out throughout the system. So we all look toward the same outcomes and the standards, but we differentiate the support, the strategy for the different subgroups of our students to get them to those outcomes. The outcomes, so for example, we have with those particular schools, they would have more teacher support, for example, for interventions. They have extended day opportunities. There are parent outreach programs for the parents because the thing in Long Beach, what we've done, I think really, really well, is bring our parents along the whole journey that we're on. So right now, when we're talking about a new strategy that's in place in, let's say, 7th grade English, we would bring all of our parents together, support them on those same strategies, so when they see those coming home, they would be able to support their students. And if they don't have those skills, here are ways that you can support the students. So that would be schools with strong components of English language learners, as well as schools that have very few. So we differentiate that support, and we give more support and resources to our schools that have, under the LCAP, that have greater numbers of EL, low-income kids, as well as foster students. So you could have a school in Long Beach that gets an additional $1 million, and a school down the street that gets an additional $50,000, because that school over here has greater needs, and they have to use those resources to support those students.
The superintendent of public instructions in his blueprint for grade schools, included early learning in both 1.0 and 2.0 versions on creating the seamless alignment with K-12. Can you expand a bit more on how we're helping support our early education teachers and obviously the children as well as it relates to this conversation?
Well, I can only speak from Long Beach, so I have 3,500 5-year-olds, and I have, 3,500 4-year-olds, and 3,000 more in my own preschools. So our goal is in 2 years, every one of our poor students will be in one of our preschools, and they get the same professional learning from our early educators. So we have a pre-K to 3rd grade early learning initiative, which is system-wide in our school system.
So my question is, I'm really excited to see that you're including both the new science standards along with the Common Program and ELA, in part because of the big overlap in practices among those disciplines. I'm curious how you guys are thinking about that in terms of your projects, in terms of trying to break down the silos that existed often in the past between the math and the English language arts and the science. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
At Marysville High School, we actually, and within Marysville Joint Unified, we are actually trying to move towards project-based learning. When I first came into the school, which, boy, 19 years ago, I just dated myself, we were in interdisciplinary units. And so I taught English and history, and then I also worked with a science teacher, and we had interdisciplinary units. And it was one of the most fabulous things that I ever did when I first started teaching. Then we ended up getting away from that. And now we are getting back into that. And so now I feel like, once again, I'm an English teacher and a history teacher, just starting to get into math, which may become some of that terrifying thing again, and into the science. And what's nice is that everybody can bring their strengths to it. There's a math teacher on my campus who was not real thrilled with the idea of having writing within it, because he said, that's why I'm a math teacher, is I don't do writing. And so now within the project-based learning, and within this new ability to bring in the various new standards, and even like with our social science teachers, they still have what they're calling their old standards, we all get to bring our strengths into it. And so if there's a science teacher who wants to do a project in their class, but they're fearing the writing assessment that may go with it or the writing assignments that may go with it, then if they come in and coordinate with me, then I can have some of that writing done in my class. I can even do some of the pre-writing within my own curriculum, so that then the students as well as the teachers all see that the education these students are receiving is not compartmentalized. When they go off into the world, the last time I checked anyway, when you go to count change to somebody, that is going to involve much more than just the math of counting the change. It's also the communication skills that go into that, as well as the skills that you had to have to actually get that job. When you go off into college, I sat in English classrooms, but I know for a fact that I ended up having to use math and science and everything else that went with it, psychology, to come in and write some of the papers that I wrote. And so we're trying to make a shift over to project-based learning. And we may not be able to do it whole scale, clear across our site, but for next year, our mission is that every teacher will at least try to have a project in their classroom, which they have to coordinate with somebody else on campus. I'm actually going to be working with our graphic design teachers, so that's the plan now. And I think it's a great methodology to work with so that you can bring more people in, and then everybody can see how everything ties together, that we're not just standalone.
Just quickly, at a project level, some of it's a grouping strategy. So there's roll-alike times when the science teachers are just with the science, and the principals are just with the principals. But there also is time when they have to be grouped together and talk about common issues. And it's just a structural grouping issue, like a classroom is a structural grouping issue. And you have to do it consciously, because otherwise people tend to sit with who they always sit with. Then I think the other thing that's part of the structural design is, when we do, well, not we, but when the ILC members do their workshops with either the teachers or the site-based leaders, the teachers have to go back and do something, try out what they said they were going to try out, and then they have to come back and talk about what happened. And when science teachers talk with maths teachers, talk with literacy teachers, or first grade teachers talk with fifth grade teachers, suddenly they realize it's our same kids. And I think that's another structural component that helps advance what you're talking about. Doesn't solve it, but helps.